Well then, good morning and welcome to another webinar titled Mastering the Interview, hosted by Chemical Engineering Life and Job Inc. My name is Humzaa Imtiaz and I will be the speaker for the day. And without further ado, the agenda for today's webinar is that we, of course, are going to be looking at how you can give your best at giving an interview. And we have divided up the webinar in 3 different parts. So in the first part, we'll look at what to do before you get to an interview. Then we'll also talk about what you should be doing during your interview. And finally, what you should be doing after the interview has ended. But before we begin, a brief introduction about myself. Well, my name is Humzaa Imtiaz, and I am the founder of Chemical Engineering Life. I am a chemical engineer myself, having graduated from the Technical University of Denmark, and since then I have been working in the pharmaceutical sector within quality and quality management systems. Being the founder of Chemical Engineering Life, I have had the opportunity to collaborate with the team of Job Inc. to be able to give this presentation today, and we truly are grateful to the team at Job Inc. for providing us with all the information and insights to be able to host this webinar. And then continue to what you should be doing before an interview. Now, a lot of people believe that, when you get a call for an interview, everything that happens within the interview happens when you're sitting in front of the interviewer. But in reality, you should be doing things even before you walk into that conference room with the interviewer. And what you should be doing is that you should prepare, and you should prepare a bit more. Because the thing is that giving an interview is all about being confident, and it's all about being prepared. And if you are prepared, and if you prepare before the interview, then of course you will be more confident, you will be more professional, you will have more tailored responses to their questions, and at the same time, you will have a much higher probability of landing the job that you're applying for. The very first thing that you should be doing before even going to the interview is that you should research the company. Now, I know it's a no-brainer, but a lot of people, they actually miss that step. It is very important that you know the company that you're applying for. You should know what sort of culture do they have, what sort of working environment they have, what sort of mission statement they have. Because imagine that you are applying for a company that really values its employee health-being or work-home balance, for example. And then you walk in an interview and all of your answers are not even remotely related to the well-being of the employees. Of course, that's going to be very difficult for the employer or for the HR person to see the relevance that why you are applying for the company. And also many times you will be asked during the interview that why is it that you're applying for that specific company, or what it is that you bring to the company, for example. And therefore, it's a very good idea for you to have a very good overview over the mission statement, the aim, the type of work they do, the type of projects they work on. You can't really have specialized in membrane technology and be applying for a cement company, So therefore, it's always a good idea to have that overview over the company. And the way you can do that is that firstly, Google the company. It's very hard to imagine that there is a company that doesn't have an official website. And most of the time, you will find all the information you need on the website. So that would be about the mission statement, the aim, the projects they do, what sort of work they do, and so on. Then you should go on LinkedIn. It's a good idea to, for example, if you're applying for a department, if you know that you're going to be applying for a process engineer role, for example, then you should go on LinkedIn, search for all the people that are working in that department. If you can find possibly someone, then you should check out their profiles and see that what sort of work it is that they're doing in that role. What sort of responsibilities do they actually have, and what sort of projects they have been involved in if it is provided on LinkedIn. And thirdly, which is a best case scenario, if you happen to know someone that works in that company, then don't be shy to reach out to them and let them know that you have been called in for a job interview and that you would like some help in knowing about the job culture that they have at the company and so on, because that's the only thing that you can find out by the people that are working there. So by doing these 3 steps, you should be able to research the company and learn everything about the company that you should know before walking into the interview. The other thing is that you should know your resume. Now, I know that a lot of people believe that they know everything, that they are the ones that wrote the resume, but still, you should know what it is that you have written. You should know what are the key achievements in your resume. And just like I said earlier, that if you're applying for a process engineering position, don't go in boosting about your job experience at a procurement department, because you need to be able to know that what part of your resume resonates with the job that you're applying for. You should know that, for example, that you were working in that role before. Like, let's say you were working as a process engineer for a previous company, then you should be able to highlight that, be able to bring out the key achievements, use your resume as a tool to convince the next person that you are the right person for the job. At the same time, you have to be confident about your resume. Like, for example, many times the employers, they may ask you about the gap, the employee gap, or sorry, the employment gap in your CV. Let's say you've not been working for 5 months or 6 months. The thing is that a lot of people, they get quite nervous when they get asked that question, but you don't have to be. You should just own up to it and say that, yeah, I was looking for a job and I couldn't find anything for 6 months. uh, Now the bad answer is that you let them know that, I couldn't find anything because the market was too tough. It's always a good idea that you should know your resume in that way, that you should say that, I did not land a job for 6 months, but that's because I was primarily only looking for process engineering positions, and there were not that many. So it was a very low frequency that I was applying to jobs for. Or you could always say that, I mean, in the beginning when I started applying, my CV was a bit weak, but through continual improvement and through feedback, I was able to then improve my resume that you see in front of you. So you see, so in that way, you can always and always, answer and own up to the things that are in your resume. And the second thing is that you should know how to answer is your GPA, for example, for your university. Now, majority of the companies, they never ask you about your GPA, or they never actually ask you about your grades. They may ask you about your thesis grade, but that is also very rare. But even if they do, and let's say that you do not have a very high GPA, or you don't really have, you had one semester where things didn't really go your way. Again, instead of making excuses, or instead of coming up with, like, other stories, just own up to it. A lot of people, they would rather have that you own up to it and come up with a reasonable reason on why it happened. You could always say that, you can see in my transcript that I have very good grades in my engineering subjects, but I didn't really do so well in my general subjects. But that's because I was focusing on engineering subjects. Or you could say that, well, I was in chemical engineering school, so programming was not something that was so important for what I wanted to do as a process engineer. So I didn't really see the need to have, higher grades in programming courses, but rather, as you can see, I have better grades in, reaction engineering, for example. That could be one way to do it. Or you could just say that, well, you could always argue that you were, for example, if you had a student job while you were studying, then you could argue that you have more experience, and then even though your grades are low, they do not represent your ability to understand the topics and be able to design heat exchangers and whatnot. So, so in that way, you really should know your resume, the weak points and your strong points. The strong points, you should always and always keep on presenting. Your weak points, do not bring them up unless they bring it up. Like, don't just walk in there and start telling them a story about your bad GPA. If they don't notice it, don't bring it up. If they don't ask you about the employment gap, do not bring it up. If they don't ask you about your specific things about your previous job, you should not bring it up unless it is one of your strong points. The third thing is that you should practice common questions. Now, of course, like interview, it's just a series of questions, right? And you'll see that some questions, they are very common during an interview. And we'll look at some of the common questions in the later slides as well. But you should prepare yourself how to answer those common questions. Don't just walk into an interview blindly, expecting that you'll just wing it, because that sometimes it works, but the problem is that if you are not prepared to give tailored answers, yeah, You may end up giving an improvised answer for the first question, for the second question, and then you will not be able to create a perfect picture with all of your answers. Because the main thing is that whenever you're giving these because oops, sorry because whenever you are giving these answers these answers to these common questions, you should be able to create a you should be able to create a common ground with all the answers. Like, don't say that you are very detail oriented with the first question, then all of a sudden change the stance to, oh, the details don't matter that much to me in your fifth question. So therefore you have to remember that you should have an idea about what are the skills that you would like to present. You should know beforehand that what are the key points of your resume that you would like to present, and then practice the common questions and try to relate the answers to those skill sets or to those experiences that you would like to present. And then then you need to be able to prepare questions for the interviewer. And that is something that a lot of people don't do, but that is actually very important, because what happens is that when you are in an interview, right? Let's say you walk in and then you answer all the questions, and then the interview ends, and then they ask you like, "Oh, do you have any questions?" And you say, "Nope, nothing," and then you just say goodbye and you leave. That doesn't really give a lasting impression that you were even bothered to know about the company or the job, or were you even remotely interested in the job at all. On the other hand, imagine that towards the end, you have a list of 5 questions that you would like to ask the employer, and you can do so. Now, do not ask, even though a lot of people say that there are no stupid questions, but do not ask stupid questions. Do not ask questions that you know the answer to. Do not ask questions that have nothing to do with the job. Don't ask that, oh, what sort of food do you guys have in your canteen? Or, oh, do you guys, is it like, can I work from home or can I work from the office? These are not the questions that that will decide whether you will get the job or not. But rather, you should firstly ask questions that highlight your own expertise in the area that you're applying for. Now, for example, let's say that you know that you will be working a lot with Excel at your new job, and you should get that idea also from the questions that they have been asking you for the 1 hour. Then you should come up with a question that that shows that you know how to work with Excel, and then make them tell you something that was not given on the job ad. For example, let's say that you could tell them, so do you guys, is it, for example, an Excel question could be that, that I understand that I will be working a lot with Excel. Do you guys prefer, or is it okay to use macros at the workplace, or are the other employees are not that well suited to work with Excel, and you guys avoid using macros in the Excel files? Now, even though it's not a very detailed or a very technical question, but it shows that at least you know how macros work. For example, let's say you're working with Python, you know that you will be working with Python programming, then you could say, oh, what sort of libraries do you guys use? Or, oh, do you guys use the Jupyter library, or do you guys use the other library? So these sort of questions should show that you know about the job, you know that what you will be working with, and you're trying to gain an interest into the company. But you could also ask questions about the company itself. Like, you could, of course, ask that, what are the future opportunities for this role that I'm applying for? Like, what are the opportunities that I will have in 2 years working here? What sort of projects will I be working? You could say that, for example, that if you are going to be using Excel at the workplace, what sort of dashboards do you guys work with? Is there a requirement that, is it more like project management based, or is it more technical based? So those sort of questions. But like I said in the beginning, that do not ask questions that have nothing to do with the job. Like, and do not ask too many questions. And again, don't walk in there with 15 questions about what you will be doing. You should only have maximum 5 questions for the interviewer, and those 5 questions should be tailored exactly, so that firstly it highlights that, you know about the job, you know about the technical skills, or the maybe the programming or the computer skills that you may have. Thirdly, if you would like to, you can ask about the project or about the company itself. And then finally, you should choose your attire properly. No one expects to walk into an interview with shorts. You should have a proper dress. You should have, a formal dress, depending on where you live. For example, if you are in a country where where the business is very formal, then you should of course try to wear a suit, wear a good dress, and don't walk in wearing a pink suit. It should be either black or blue, something which is very formal. But if it's a business casual setting, then you can of course always just go in and but still wear like proper attire, because that also matters a lot. It really shows that you're prepared. It shows that you're not just stopping by for the interview before you're going to the beach. So it is very important that you put some thought into what sort of dress you will be wearing. And again, it circles back to the that you have to research the company. Because some companies, like for example, if you're applying for a bank, for example, now the bank environment, that is very formal, so you have to wear a suit when you're working there. Let's say that you're applying for a consulting company. Again, your dress is 90% of your job, to be honest, because you are, as a consultant, you will be working with people on day-to-day basis. So you should have a pressed suit. You should comb your hair, have a haircut maybe before, and then go in there, and then you're all suited up. If you're applying for a normal company where you know that they are very business casual, then of course you should wear a proper shirt, or button shirt and pants and boots and so on. So it again comes down to what it is that you're applying for. Like if you're applying for a business casual company, which are mostly business casual, you don't have to wear a suit. You don't want to be wearing a suit, whereas your interviewer are wearing business casual clothes. At the same time, you don't want to be applying for a formal setting and walk in there with a business casual clothing. So therefore, it's very important that you again research the company, and then you are prepared and you know that what sort of setting it is that you're applying for. So that was all that you should do before an interview. Now, to talk about what you should be doing during your interview, is that when you're walking in an interview, well, there are a lot of things that you should think about, because you only get one chance to make a first impression. So therefore, you should be confident when you are greeting your interviewer. Like, don't go in there and start fidgeting with your hands, or start looking around the building, or start looking at the roof. But rather, you should maintain eye contact. You should have a positive tone, and most importantly, please smile. Don't no one is there. Don't try to give off the energy of you being mysterious or not, but you should smile when you are in an interview. Just give off a warm greeting. Shake their hand and say like, hey, how are you? Introduce yourself, and then sit down and have that enthusiasm and positivity in your voice. Because the thing is that if you're smiling, and if you have a positive energy, that really gives off a very good first impression, rather than someone that is like angry or trying to be mysterious. You don't want them to think of you as mysterious or as an alpha male. That's not how interviews work. Secondly, you should take off your jacket. I know it's a very and people don't think about it, but when you walk into an interview room, you have to remember that you should be calm. You should clear your head, and if you are wearing a winter jacket or even a summer's jacket, you should take it off, put it on a hanger, or put it on a chair, because the problem is that it's like, imagine that you invite me for a dinner party in your house. I come in there and I'm wearing my winter jacket and I'm wearing a suit underneath, and then and throughout the party I don't take off my jacket. It does feel very odd, right, for someone not taking off the jacket. And at the same time, when you are in an interview, you want to give off the impression that you are, comfortable with them, and you are also in a way that just as much you are a stranger to them, they're also strangers to you. So you always have to give them the feeling that you are someone who can make them feel comfortable. So take off your jacket, put it at the back of your chair, and then sit down. Because sometimes if you don't take off your jacket, then it gives all the impression that you are in a hurry, or that you're not comfortable, or yeah, you know that you don't really care that much about an interview and you just want to get it done and then just go out the door. But when you take off the jacket, it gives off the impression that you know that you are willing to make time and that you are there to answer all the questions that they may have. And then the third thing is that when you are walking in, when you are walking into an interview, you should take a notepad with you. And it's like, and again, it's just sort of an impression that you have a notepad with you, and then you should put it on the table and with a pen, and then because then it gives off an impression that you are a very professional, that you will be making notes in the interview, that you have any questions noted down in that notepad, because it again gives off the impression that you're prepared, that you're not here to just wing the interview, but rather you have come to the interview with some thoughts. You're willing to take notes, you're willing to take feedback, and that you have been thinking about the company. So that is also like a very small detail that that a lot of people do not remember. And then again, print your resume and print your cover letter. That is very important, because what happens is that imagine you're sitting in the interview and the person says, oh, it says that you were working with the quality management system in your previous job. And you think to yourself, oh, did I write that? Can I please borrow the copy that you have? That looks very odd, right? But rather you should have your own resume. So for example, if someone makes a comment about your resume, because a lot of things can happen, you can have a grammatical error or a spelling error, or it could have, maybe they could have printed the only first page of your CV and not the second page of your CV. That could also happen, and then in that case, you should have your own CV, your own copy, so that you can bring it out, take it out, and then go and trace the comment that they're giving, and then you should be able to defend it. Like, oh, hey, yeah, so in my previous role, I was working in my QMS. As you can see, I wrote it down right here, right? Or for example, they could ask like, oh, we don't see that you have been working with Excel in your previous jobs. Then again, you could take out your own copy and then you could point them to where it says that, oh, you can see right here, I wrote a point that I have been working with Excel. Or you can see that I wrote a project title right here that shows that I was working directly with Excel with all the advanced functions. So that's how you use it. So therefore, it's a very good idea for you to have your own copy of your resume and also your own letter. And remember, what happens is that a lot of people, they use different resumes for different jobs. So that could be that you applied for 5 jobs and you use 5 different resumes. Do not be the person that prints the wrong resume for the wrong interview, because again, that looks very odd. Imagine that you sent out one CV for a cost engineering position, and you send one for process engineering position, and then you change the bullet points, and then all of a sudden you bring in your cost engineering CV to the process engineering interview. It may not have that much of an impact, but the problem will be that when you are presenting yourself to be an expert in process engineering and you would like to land a job in the process engineering domain, then all of a sudden you have a CV that says that you're an expert in cost engineering and not process engineering. So that, again, that looks very odd and also looks very unprepared and very unprofessional. So therefore, print the correct resume, print the correct letter, and then always keep that on the table when you are in an interview. And finally, like I said in the beginning, smile. Don't smile too much. You're not a jogger, but you should smile at an optimum amount to make the other person feel comfortable. Because 90% of the interview is actually nonverbal, and that is something that we all have to remember, that your body language, it plays a very, very, very important role in an interview. If you're not smiling, if you are angry, if you are looking around all the time, if you're fidgeting, if you are scratching your head all of a sudden, or try to avoid all these things in an interview and try to maintain an eye contact. And of course, like sometimes some people, like myself included, they get nervous, they are very shy, they're not used to having that eye contact. So there is a trick that you can use, is that you should always stare at the point between the eyes for the people, because it gives all the impression that you are maintaining eye contact, but then you're not exactly doing eye contact, or you should stare at them in their nose. That also sometimes helps. So because then you are at least staring in the same area. But don't get into an eye staring contest. Again, you don't have to go into extreme for anything. Just maintain a very casual, comfortable body language. Stay calm. Show from your body language that you're calm, that you're confident, and that you're not nervous. And most importantly, when you start doing too many body language things, like scratching your head, moving your hands, it also comes across that you're making up stories, that you're almost lying to the interviewer. So therefore, always keep that in mind, that the more calm you are, the more confident you will be, and the more trustworthy you will come across to the interviewer as well. Yeah, so these are like the things that you should remember, that when you are walking into an interview. And again, so to summarize, when you're walking into an interview, when you walk into the hall, you should be confident. When you're greeting them, you should, of course, take off your jacket. And then if you take your office bag with you, you should take out the notepad, put it on the table, take out your resume, put it on the table, and then put your hands together, and then tell them that you would like to start the interview. Yes, I can see that there is a question. Yeah, sure, you can go ahead and ask the question.
Sir, during the interview, are we allowed to use a little bit of body, like are we allowed to use our hands? Like if they ask us something and we want to specific this thing, are we allowed to use our hand, or it's impreferable?
Yep. Now that is actually a very good question, and you should be using your hands. Like for example, the thing is that when you are sitting in front of the interviewer and they ask you a question, you should always use your hands to give a sort of like a movement. Because if you are like don't just sit there in front of them as a statue and don't move a muscle, because that also looks very odd. That also looks as if you have memorized all of your answers. The more casual you are, the more calm you are, that the better it will be for them to for you to come across as more trustworthy. And the thing is that, and you'll see that a lot of times when people are giving, speaking on TED, for example, or when they are giving speeches, they're always using their hands to convey their point. Like for example, like this. And that is something that you should always do in your interview. Don't, of course, go around moving your hands all together, but like for example, you could say that, oh, I was working with that, and then you could you refer to that. Or for example, if they ask you a question about process engineering, they're asking you about process diagrams, then you could say that, oh, in the first part I have my heat exchanger, then right after I have my process tank, then we have a pump. So in that way you can use your hands as well to, when you are trying to make a mental picture for example, in process designing, or when you're trying to just give a random point, so you could always use your hands like that. But again, don't overdo it. The body language that you should avoid is when you start fidgeting, when you all of a sudden start cracking your hands. You shouldn't start scratching your face. You shouldn't start fixing your hair. You shouldn't start like looking around in the interview hall. You shouldn't keep staring at your resume for the 1 hour that you're there. You shouldn't start, tapping your foot. You shouldn't and then, like for example, when you're trying to think of something, and it's a very common one, when you're trying to think of something, don't start doing like this in the interview, like, oh, I know that there was one point that I can't remember. Don't do that. Just be like, oh, there was a point that I can't remember, because that also looks very informal. So therefore these are the body language that you should avoid. uh, but of course, like, the more confident you are, the more calm you are. Keep a straight back, uh, and then use your hands to convey a point, because that's also like one of those power pose things that you should use more your hands, so you're conveying your idea to the next person. So yeah, so I hope that answered your question, but that was a good question. That is something that you should do. So so like I said, when you walk into the hall, greet them, take off your jacket, take out your notepad, put it on the table, put your resume on the other side, and then smile. And then they will of course start asking the questions. Again, depending on, and this is something that is your own choice, but me personally, like when I walk in and I have an interview, then I don't sit unless the interviewer has sat down as well. That's also kind of like a very, it's something, like, again, it depends on what country you're from. Like, I know that from in a European country, for example, that's not really something that happens. But if you are from an Asian country or even from the US, then that formality is there. So again, depending on, it is again a sign of, you're giving a sort of respect to the other person. So like if there are two guys or two people, and then you're sitting, and you're standing, sorry, and uh, before sitting down, you should make sure that they sit down, and then you should sit down. At the same time, let's say that you are doing an interview, like for example, you are being interviewed by one HR person and one manager, and then all of a sudden, some other person walks into the door. It could be maybe another manager, some other HR person, or maybe the hire manager. Always stand up when you're shaking their hands. I know that a lot. What happens is that a lot of people they're so nervous that they just shake their hands while sitting down, but it kind of gives off a bad impression. But again, again, it depends on what sort of country it is that you are in. Like me personally, I always prefer to like stand up and then shake their hand and then say your name, and then they will say their name, and then then you give off that impression that, oh hey, and then sit down. Uh, but at the same time, let's say that you are giving it the interview. Do not stand up and shake their hands unless they walk towards you to shake your hand. That is a very vital point. Like imagine that you're answering a question to the interviewer, and then all of a sudden someone walks in, and then you stop the answer and you just stand up and then you shake their hand. That's, you shouldn't do that, because sometimes it could be that the person was late for the interview, so he's just going to walk in slowly and then sit down in his chair, and then he'll probably give you a smile, so you should smile back. But don't like but unless he comes in and shakes your hand, you shouldn't stand up and shake your hand. Finish the answer, finish your answer, and then you should, afterwards you can of course meet him and talk to him. There. So these are the tips that you should do when you're walking into the interview. And then let's talk about what you should be doing when you're answering the questions in the interview. Because like I said before, right, that answering the questions, that is the main part of the interview. And the very first thing that I would like to say is that you should never ever answer an hypothetical question with a hypothetical answer. 90% of your questions in the interview, they are hypothetical questions, right? They, like for example, the HR would never ask you that what have you, like for example, they will always ask you, what would you do if you have a conflict with your employee, right? What would you do if you are working with 5 people in a project and one of them is not doing their work? What would you do if you have a deadline by the end of the day, but you have a personal appointment? How would you handle that, right? So HR will always ask you hypothetical questions. They will give you a scenario, and then you will have to be able to answer on that scenario. Now, the thing is that you should never ever give an hypothetical answer to these hypothetical questions. And I'll tell you why. Because, for example, this question that I asked, that let's say what would you do if you have a deadline by the end of the day, and you have a personal appointment? So how would you, take care of it? If you say, oh, if I have a deadline by the end of the day and I have a personal appointment, I would just tell my manager that I have a personal appointment, and then I'll just leave the office. Uh, that could be one way to answer it. Or you could give a better answer and say that, well, I will try my best to finish what I was working on and then achieve the deadline, notify my manager, and if I'm not done, then I could, of course, like try to move the question or move the system around. But the thing is that when you give a hypothetical answer, it comes across that you are just giving an answer, that this is something that you will do in that scenario. On the other hand, you could always say that, well, in my previous job, this used to happen quite a lot. This is something that was very common, especially when I was back in university or when I was working. Like many times, deadlines interalign with the personal appointments. And I always made sure that if I had a deadline on the same day and I had a personal appointment, that I plan, of course, from the very beginning, If I know that I have to go to a wedding on Wednesday, I take care of everything on Monday, Tuesday, so that deadlines and that my personal appointment do not align on Wednesday evening. At the same time, if it is something that can be changed, then of course I always used to take care of it. Like for example, there was an instance when I was working on a project and I had to go to the doctor in the evening. So of course, in that scenario, things could not be changed. And I notified my manager and I notified my team members that I will be gone for 2 hours, but I will be back after 2 hours. You know, so that is like a very good answer. And the reason it's a very good answer is because you are giving an actual example of of your past experience, and you are fitting in what you actually did in that situation, right? They ask you a hypothetical question, but then you have shown the interviewer that, I have done it before. I have been in that situation before, and I handled it perfectly. And my manager was happy the way I handled it. My team members were happy the way I handled it. You know, and that gives you off an impression that this guy, he's experienced enough, that this guy, he has done these things before. So always and always give an actual example of the scenario that you were in before, and then try to relate that to the question that you now have. So for example, they could ask you that, oh, well, you are working in a team of 5 people, and all of a sudden one of your team members is not doing his or her work. How would you handle it? Then you could always say that, well, back in university, that used to be very common. Like once I was working on my reaction engineering project, and we were 4 guys in the project. And one of us was very lazy. He was not doing the work. And we felt that we were getting all the load on the 3 of us. And therefore, what we did was that we first spoke to him, and we told him that, this is a no-go, because this is a graded project, and it is not fair for the other 3 of us. So we try to handle it cordially. But if that sadly did not help, so we then had to raise the issue with the professor, or something like that, or whatever that you did during the situation. So therefore, you see, again, you are relating that hypothetical question to a very, very specific example from your past experience. If you don't have a specific example, you can also give a very general statement, but use the words, oh, I have in my experience, because that tells them that you have done these things before, that you have been in this situation before, and that you are indeed capable of solving these problems if they do come up. Uh, because the thing is that some things you can learn, some things you cannot learn. The problem is that many of these companies, they're not really willing to hire you and to teach you how to handle at work conflicts. They're not interested in someone that will be learning how to do these things, right? They would very much like to have someone that already knows how to handle these situations. So when you always give that sort of an answer, you are telling them indirectly, subconsciously, then they are making the connection in their head that, this guy, he knows what he's doing, that he knows that he has done this before, that he has been through the same situation before, and that he was able to handle it perfectly. So that is what you should be aiming for when you are, giving it that sort of answer. And in order for you to remember that, you should remember the word STAR. The STAR, it stands for situation, task, action, result. So you had a situation, then you had a task, you came up with an action, and then you had a result. Try to remember these 4 steps when you're giving an answer to the interviewer about a hypothetical question. That what was the situation, what was the problem, what was the task, what was the action that you took, and what was the result. And it doesn't even have to be a successful experience. You could always say that, for example, coming back to the question that we previously answered, that about what you would do if you were working with 5 people and one of them was not doing their work. You could always have said, well, we tried speaking to the professor. We went directly to the professor and we told him that, this guy, he was not doing it after agreeing among us. But, looking back with hindsight, I feel that we should have handled it differently. I feel like we should have spoken to him first, rather than going to the professor, because I felt that maybe that would have made the situation more cordial. It could have made it more lenient for him as well. So you see, so always try to include that in your statements as well. Don't try to give a perfect answer, but give a realistic, give an honest, and give an a good answer, you know. So for example, like I said now, that you can always tell that you made a mistake in your previous experience, and that maybe in the future, if you are faced with the same situation, then you would maybe go in and do things differently, because that also shows that you are very, very self-aware, and that you are open for improvement in the future. But this is like the strategy that you should apply throughout the interview. From the very first question to the very last, is that you should relate every single question to your past experience. And then I have to say that this is like the most important part, because uh, the the only reason you are sitting in an interview is to convince the people, or sell yourself to them, so that they think that you are the person that they are looking for, right? You're not there to convince them that you are the smartest person in the room, or you're the smartest person in the world. That's not the purpose there. You have to convince them that the questions that they're asking you, that the requirements that they have, you fulfill those requirements. And it happens quite a lot that you could know everything. You could literally be the smartest person in the entire world, and then still not get a job at the interview. Why? Because you did not fulfill the requirements that they had. So if they want you to be an helpful employee, then you must be able to convince them that you have, in your previous experience, been an helpful employee. Don't try to sell them that you are a very technical person when they're actually looking for someone that will be working in a non-technical area. So therefore, always try to convince. Therefore, always try to. Sorry. Therefore, always try to give realistic answers from your past experience to the hypothetical questions that they may have. The second thing is that the reason that you are in an interview is that because you're applying for a specific job, right? Let's say that you're applying for a process engineering position. You will be working as a process engineer. All of your answers, they should be focused on the job requirement for a process engineer. They don't care if you are very good in financial modeling. They don't care if you can fit 25 Oreos in your mouth. They don't care that you can jump 5 feet. Those things are not relevant to a process engineering position. All of your answers, all of your skills, all of everything that you would like to present, that should be related to the job requirement. And the best way to do it is that before you walk into an interview, and that's also something that I mentioned earlier, that you should research the job that you're applying for. You should research the people that are working in that similar situation or similar role in the same company. So, for example, you go on LinkedIn and you go in there and you search 5 people that are working as process engineers. Look at what it is that they're working with. Are they designing heat exchangers? Are they working with the mathematical modeling? Are they working with Aspen? Are they working with what it is that they're working with? And then make a list of top 5 skills that you would like to present in the job interview. You would like to present yourself as being very detail oriented. You would like to present yourself to be very a problem solver. You would like to present yourself to be a very good in time management. You would like to have leadership skills, and you would like to show yourself to be for example, a very strong hold on document management, for example. These 5 skills, for example, that you would like to present in the job interview. Every single answer that you give should highlight these 5 skills. You should try to convince them that you are the right person for the job that you are applying for. And that is very important. Uh, think of it this way, that uh, you you could be a person of many skills. Of course, every single person is a master of many skills. You could know everything. You could know a lot of things, but They don't care about the things that are not relevant to process engineering. They only care about things that are relevant for the job that you're applying for. You could be very good in designing heat exchangers, but if you are going to be working for a membrane company, they want someone that knows how to design a membrane, right? So therefore, keep that in mind when you're answering all the questions. Do not go start boosting about everything that you can do. No, that doesn't help, because it doesn't matter that you were the head of a magazine, for example, but how does that relate to process engineering? So that's the first thing, that you should always highlight the main skills that you wish to highlight. And then the second thing is that if you are a fresh graduate, or if you are maybe changing careers, maybe, then the problem tends to be that how do you connect your previous experiences to the job that you are applying for? Like, for example, let's say that you were working in procurement, for example, right? Let's say that you're working in procurement, and then all of a sudden you would like to move into process engineering. Uh, in first thought, the two things don't go together at all. Like, how can, like, if you have job experience from working in procurement, how on earth would you use that experience to get into process engineering, right? It doesn't really make much sense, to be honest, right? But uh, every single experience that you have, you should use that for the job you're applying for, and regardless what the job is, you have to separate the job from the skill sets that you used in that job. I'll give you an example. Let's say that someone was working as a procurement analyst, right? What are the skills that that person uses in everyday basis? Data analysis, stakeholder management, document management, uh, you know, detail oriented, uh, and of course, like, present communication skills, because you are every single day you are speaking with different stakeholders. You need to communicate all of the procurement information to different stakeholders, to your managers, to senior management, and so on, right? So these 5 skills that you have from working as a procurement analyst. Now imagine that you go and you apply for a process engineering role. Now, even the roles, they are not the same. They're very different. The area is different. The domain is different, but the skills, they are transferable. If you are sitting in your job interview and they say, oh, so you, as a process engineer, you will be working with a lot of operators. Uh, how would you expect to do in that area? And you say, oh, well, in my previous job, I was working as a procurement analyst. And as a procurement analyst, 90% of my job was actually presenting procurement information, financial information to non-finance people, and to even non-technical, non-procurement people in the company. So therefore, being able to present technical or corporate knowledge to a layman is been something that I have been working on for the past 2 years. At the same time, I was very much involved in stakeholder management, and therefore, that meant that I had to be in touch with great deal of people from different areas, from and also from different levels of management. So therefore, I feel like I'm very good in being able to present complex technical ideas to non-technical people. So you see, so with that answer, you will able to connect your procurement role to a process engineering role, uh, because the person doesn't care that you're working as procurement or not, but the thing that they will keep in their mind is that, okay, so this guy, he's been working with communication, he knows stakeholder management. At the same time, the person could say that, if you're applying for a process engineering position, it's a very mathematically intensive job. Do you have anything that you could have done before that resonates with what you've been looking for? Then you could again say, well, procurement was 90% of it was data analysis. I was working with different proposals, and then it was always about comparing multiple price quotations with each other, trying to come up with the best quotation. And then many times, 90% of my job, once again, was working with Excel, coming up with data analysis. Then again, I was working directly with supplier management. We were working with historical data, and so on and so on. So therefore, I feel like if I will be working as a process engineer, a majority of my job will also be data analysis. because I will be looking at data, trying to come up with deviations and the continuous improvement. So I feel that the skills that I have learned from procurement are very much transferable to being a process engineer. So you see, so these are the two aspects that you must remember. The firstly, that if you have relevant job experience, then of course, that is like icing on a cake, because then you can easily transfer everything that you've learned before. But if you are a fresh graduate, if you are someone that has had a non relevant job before, and you're applying for an engineering position, for a finance position, or for some other position, it also works the other around, right? If you were working as a process engineer and you would like to work in a bank all of a sudden, again, you should be able to connect the skills that you have learned from your job and transfer them to your next job. So always try to separate the job and the skills, because people never really make that differentiation. They always consider the job as one entity, but in reality, your job title is not very important, to be honest. You could be working as a process engineer, as a cost engineer. You could be working in the pharma sector or in the oil sector. You could be working in procurement or in marketing or whatnot. The most important thing that you should be highlighting with your answers and with your resume are the skills that you possess, the skills that makes you a very valuable man to a lot of companies. And therefore you should remember that, and therefore every time you're trying to answer the question, you should relate your skills to the job requirement. And that is like very important. That's something that a lot of people don't do, because the mistake that they make is that they start presenting everything that they have. They would like to let the other person know that they have everything. Oh, I can do data analysis. Oh, I can do marketing. I can do presentations. I know how to use a Word document. I know how to write a report. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. But most of them, they end up being useless. Like, you don't necessarily need to know how to, for example, let's say you are working with a company that doesn't have what do you call it, uh, they don't have Teams channel, and then you all of a sudden you're presenting that you're very good with Teams. That is not something that you should be presenting in the job interview. So the third thing is that you should listen actively to the interviewer before you start giving your answers, and that is very important as well, because uh, you don't want to make them repeat the question again and again. you know uh, that's like, for example, let's say they ask you, what do you like to do in your free time? And you're like, and then you start giving something, a very different answer. And that's again something that's not really, that again comes across as very unprofessional, something that means that you're not listening very clearly to the person. And therefore, that is something that you should always remember. At the same time, do not interrupt your interviewer. If they're asking a question, give them time to make that question. And once they have fully, said, asked the question, then start answering it. Like, don't be the person that start answering already from the very first moment they start asking. So that's again, another thing that you must remember. So the three things that when you're answering the questions during the interview: firstly, never answer hypothetical with a hypothetical. Secondly, always try to aim your answers to the job requirements that you're applying for. And finally, listen actively and clearly to the interviewer. And also, I will actually like to add one more thing, and that is that you should speak slowly and clearly in an interview. Don't speak too fast. Don't speak like a lot of people. They speak very low. Nope. You should, and don't speak too loud. You should have that conversational level sound. You should have a professional language. You should use a professional language. Of course, don't start dropping the F bombs during during the interview. You should have a professional language. Use a Don't use slang. Don't start calling your interviewer dude. That doesn't get you very far either. Great. And then finally, I'll add that you should admit when you don't know the answer. Remember that when you are applying for a job, any job, let it be a process engineering job or sorry, when you're applying for a process engineer, when you are applying for a process engineering job, or you are applying for a finance job, or whatever the case may be, you should uh, you should be able to admit that you don't know an answer. If they ask you a question about saying that, oh, do you know, for example, how to handle a situation, and you don't know how to handle the situation, be willing to admit it. Say that I have not experienced that before. For example, the question that sometimes people get asked is, have you ever experienced someone else taking credit for your work? And you could always say, sadly, I have not experienced that before, but if I was to, I would probably handle it in this way. Don't don't try to link all of the questions to your past experiences. Again, that also comes across as somewhat that you're trying to make up stories, right? But if you don't know the answer, be willing to admit it. If you are, for example, if you are a chemical engineering graduate and you're going for the job, and they ask you all of a sudden that, oh, have you ever worked with heat exchangers? And you don't know how to work with heat exchangers, then you can say that, I have not worked directly with heat exchangers, but I have worked with flash tanks. I have worked with the process tanks. I have worked with process design. I know how to design a heat exchanger, but I have never really worked with the maintenance of it or something else, right? You should be able to admit that you don't know the answer, firstly, and secondly, that you are willing to learn it. That is the main takeaway. You should come across as someone who is willing to learn from the job, from the people, and is not limited to the knowledge he or she already has. Just like, I believe it was Socrates who said that I am the wisest of them all because I know I'm not the wisest, right? And that is something that you should keep at the back of your head. Some companies, they don't want someone who comes across as know-it-all. They want someone that they can train for the job, someone that they can teach new skills. Me personally, I feel like I learned more in the first 6 months of my job than I learned from 5 years from being in the university, right? Because you learn a lot more in the job, and you are trained for the job that you will be working for. So therefore, keep that in mind, that if you don't know the answer, admit it, uh, and say that you are willing to learn, and that you are, for example, it could be that they ask you about Excel, that do you know how to make macros in Excel? If you don't know the answer, say that, I have basic knowledge in Excel. I do not know how to make macros, but for the past 6 months, I have been taking online courses. I have been following it on YouTube, and I'm trying to, get my head around how to work with macros. That is also a very reasonable answer. You could also say that, I never have had to work with Excel before. In my previous company, we were not allowed to use macros because a lot of people, they were not very good in using Excel. So therefore, I have focused my entire expertise in using advanced formulas in Excel. That could also be a limitation. Then you could say that, but if in my new role, if we are going to be using Excel, then of course I am open to learning more of it. But you should always be able to reflect and come across as someone that you're willing to learn, and that even though you don't know something, you are able to admit it, and that you're able to move on from it. So these are like the 4 tips that you should do when you are trying to answer the questions during the interview. Now, of course, the most common questions that you may have, that you can get in an interview, is that, what is your biggest weakness, for example? That tends to be a very difficult question to answer for some people. And I can let you know that if you get asked this question during the interview, the thing that you should remember is that the weakness that you give to the interviewer should be the one that can be improved in the future. Don't give a weakness which cannot be improved, because that, like, for example, don't go in and say that you have trouble waking up at 8 in the morning. That's not a weakness. You're just plain lazy. Don't say that that oh, that you cannot run 2 kilometers. Again, irrelevant to the job that you're applying for. Give a weakness which can be improved. Uh, give a technical weakness. Say that I am very good in Excel. I am very good in using advanced formulas in Excel, but I feel like I'm a bit weak when I'm working with macros. I feel like I'm very good in working with data analysis when it comes to analyzing them, cleaning it, but I sometimes have trouble in coming up with ways to present my data to the people. You could always say that I feel like I'm a very structured person, and therefore sometimes I like to get things done in a very specific manner. And some people may feel that I come across as a bit rigid, but it's just that I'm a very structured and I would like to do things in a very stepwise fashion. So you see, in these answers, the thing that is common is that you gave an answer that is improvable. Secondly, you gave an example on how you are improving yourself. You can always give an example on how you're improving yourself. You don't know Excel? I have been taking online courses for the past 6 months. Uh, I'm a very structured person. People think of me sometimes as being very rigid, but now I try to speak to the people, to the team members that I'm working with. I have tried to speak. I always present my project plan, and I always try to be more lenient with my team members. At the same time, you need to highlight a skill which you are very strong at while you're presenting your weakness. You know, like for example, you could like I said in the very beginning that I am very good in advanced Excel formulas, but I'm just slightly weak in using macros, right? So now in a way that you presented your weakness, but at the same time you even gave them impression that you're very good in the other part of it. I am very good in analyzing my data. I'm very good in data cleaning and so on and so on, but I sometimes have trouble presenting my data in graphs and in charts, right? Because if you take this approach, then your weakness does not seem as big as compared to your strength. So even though you are answering a weakness question, you are still presenting the area that you are good at or you're strong at. So that's how you should focus on answering this question. And the second question, that why do you want to work for this company? Now, a bad answer would be that because you could always go in and say that I would like to work for this company because you guys are hiring and I'm unemployed. You could try that, and then it probably would not be as attractive to the interviewer. But to be able to answer this question, you should have researched the company. You cannot answer this question unless you know what the company actually does. If you're applying for a consulting company, for example, then you could always say that the reason I'm applying for this company and the reason I would like to work for this company, firstly, you guys work with the stuff that I am genuinely very interested in. You are a consulting company, an engineering company working with the cement industry. I have specialized in cement production. I have been working in the cement industry for the past 5 years, and I feel like now it's the right step for me to step into consulting, and I would like to work for you. And the reason I'm working for you is that because you guys are working with some very big projects, and I feel like by working for this company, I will get an opportunity to learn a lot more than what I was learning in my previous company. You are a bigger company, and I feel like the skill sets that I have achieved in my past 5 years of working, they are very much transferable, and I feel like I will have more opportunities in your company than I did in my previous company. The main question, when they ask you this question, they quite frankly do not care why do you want to work for this company. If you're applying for example, Apple, they know why you want to work for this company. They know that they are a big company. They know that they are a famous company. So you don't have to tell them that the reason I'm applying for your company is because you are a rich company or you're a famous company. Nope. What they're actually asking you is that why should they hire you for this company? So technically, you should be able to answer that question by saying that what it is that you are bringing to the company. How would you bring value to the company? But you have to answer that question in terms of the aim and the mission statement and the projects that the company is working for. But again, that requires that you have fully researched the company before coming in. And then you have to be, of course, be passionate about the things that they are working with, of course. And then the third question, describe a challenging situation that you have faced. Again, just like we talked about earlier, that you should use the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. Pick a clearly defined challenge that you faced, and then how you solved it. But at the same time, you should pick a challenge which directly reflects the job role that you are applying for. That is very important. Don't say that you know, that I was obese 5 years ago and I lost 5 kilograms. That is a challenge, and that is very difficult. But doesn't help in how you can be a process engineer, right? Pick a professional challenge that you had to overcome and how you overcame it. You could say that when I was back in and if you're a fresh graduate, you could always say that, when I was back in university, I was having very much trouble in getting my grades up. That was a challenge. But then I started using these strategies, and I starting a time management technique. I started focusing more on my weaknesses and then try to solving my weaknesses, and that's how I improved my grades. That is a very relevant relevant challenge that you could present in an interview if you are a fresh graduate. If you have been in the industry for a while, then of course you can always say, well, in my previous company, we were working at a project, and there was downsizing all of a sudden, and we lost a great deal of our team members. But that it was a challenge, because we still had to finish our project, and I did these actions. I changed the project plan. I did this, I did that, and we were still able to reach the deadline for the project. That is also a very good answer, because now you have presented a challenge, and then you did explain what you did, and then what were the results of that problem. But always remember that you should answer it in a step. So you describe the problem, describe the challenge, what you did, and what were the solutions. What were the results? Sorry. So you see, so in 3 steps, you should always answer the question. And then, of course, the last question, that how do you handle stress and pressure? You should, it's a very common question that gets asked in an interview, and you should again give a real life example of how you dealt with stress and pressure. Different people have it. It is a very it's like a two-edged sword, because you could either answer it in a very casual manner, in a very personal manner, or you could also answer it in a very professional manner. You could always say that, in order for me to relieve my stress and pressure, I work out, I go for a jog, I go for cycling, I go for, I watch television, I read books, and, all that sort of thing. Or you could always say that, well, if I'm very stressed at work and I'm in very pressure, I try to keep calm. I try to understand what the pressure, and I try to prioritize what it is that I'm working with, so that I can manage my stress and manage my pressure. Because then, of course, it depends. If I am in stress because there are too many deadlines, then I will most probably go and speak to my manager about it, and to notify him or her that, there are too many deadlines. I'm having a very stressful week. I would let my coworkers know, for example, that I'm having a very stressful week, and then that I have a headache, and then, therefore I will not be talking as much as I normally do, for example. So these are the two side of questions that you can always give to the employer. But give a realistic answer. Don't be the person that says that, oh, I'm never stressed. I can work on as many projects as you like. Nope, everyone is stressed. Everyone is under a lot of pressure. So always give a realistic answer, and come across as humans, because of course the people that you'll be working for, they are also humans after all. So that's how you should be able to answer these most common questions during an interview. And finally, that we have been talking about what you should do, but at the same time, this is a checklist about what you should not do during an interview. Do not be late for an interview. Please do not be late for an interview. If you are late, due to, at least have the courtesy to give them a call or drop them a message if you are genuinely late for an actual reason. But don't be late just because you woke up late, or because it took you too long to shower, or the traffic was too much. Nope. These are the things that you should have known beforehand. God forbid, if you are in an accident, for example, that's something that, that's not something that you could have, expected. If there was an accident on the motorway, and then that's why you're late, again, that's something out of your control. That's not something that, that you could not have expected, right? So, but try not to be late. It's better to be there 30 minutes early than to be too late. But like, don't walk into the lobby 30 minutes early. Like, just go there and wait in the parking lot, and then maybe walk in there like 10 minutes before. Because what happens is that, let's say the interview is at 11, then you need to go at the lobby. You need to tell the receptionist that, oh, hey, I'm here for the interview. Then the person will come down to pick you up. Then they'll take you to the meeting room or the conference room where you will be interviewed. So you see, so that normally takes 10 minutes. So if your interview is at 11, maybe try to be there like 15 minutes before. Because then in those 15 minutes, you can always, like, get a cup of coffee or get some to drink. The earlier you are in the building, the more calm you will be by the time of the interview. Because then you are like a bit relaxed, and if you are sitting in the room for like 2 minutes by yourself, then you are much more relaxed to the surroundings, and then you'll be much better in answering all the questions. So make that a habit, that please do not be late for an interview. Secondly, never ever speak negatively about your previous manager or company. Don't start giving out secrets or backbiting about your previous employer or your previous employees or even the company. Just say that I'm like, even if they ask for it, never ever blame your managers or your previous company for your failure. Try to give a very diplomatic answer. The problem is that let's say that you are working in the pharma sector and you are moving from a pharma company to another pharma company. You may or may not know that the person that is interviewing you may or may not even know your previous manager. It happens. It can very easily happen that you could say something about your previous manager, and then he or she could find a way to go and tell that to your previous manager as well. Yeah. Even though it may seem that you are leaving the company and you don't care about what they think, but still it comes across as very um, unloyal as well to your next employer. Because if you're willing to speak bad about your previous employer, that means that you're also willing to speak bad about your current employer to your next employer, right? So always, like, avoid giving out negative comments. And generally, not just in the interviews, but also the workplace, like, the more you stay away from negative comments and backbiting, the better your work life will actually be. So do not come unprepared. That's something that we have talked about a lot today, that you should always be prepared for the interview. Always be prepared. Walk in there with with your notepad, with your resume, with your pen, with the questions, with the answers that you want to give. So do not be unprepared. Do not interrupt the interviewer, and that is also very important, because when they are trying to ask you a question, let them ask the question. Do not interrupt them in the middle of the sentence, because two things happen by that. Firstly, you come across as very impatient, you come across as very impolite, and secondly, do not put ideas in their head. If they're asking a question about your let's say they're about to ask you a question about your education, don't all of a sudden interrupt them and start talking about your job experience, because that also comes across as somewhat that you are trying to hide, that you're not willing to answer the question that they want to ask. So therefore, do not interrupt the interviewer. Let them ask the question, because you have no choice. You have to answer the question that they will ask. So even if you keep interrupting them, they will still continue to ask the question. So always keep that in mind. Do not use inappropriate language. It is, of course, a no-brainer. Do not use inappropriate language in an interview. Be professional, be appropriate, and be respectful to yourself and to the interviewer. Do not talk too much. And what I mean by that is that every time you get asked a question, do not start giving a monologue for the next 30 minutes. Your answers should be should be concise, and they should be focused on the question that is being asked. You're not a politician, you're just there to ask for a job. What happens is that, let's say that somebody asks you about what were you doing in your previous job, for example. And then you start on a 20-minute monologue explaining what it is that you were doing and the people that you were working with, the projects you were working with. Nope. Only answer the question that is relevant. Only answer only give the answer that is relevant to the question that is being asked. And the more you talk, and like how they always, like in these law films, they always say the sentence that everything that you say will be used against you. The same holds true in an interview. The more you speak, the more you talk, the more ideas, the more questions you will get asked. The less you talk and the more concise you talk, the less questions you will actually get asked by the interviewer. Because to give an example, what happens is that, let's say you explain your resume. Majority of the questions that the interviewer will ask you are based on your own answers. So you want to answer the questions that the interviewer is asking and not the other way around. You don't want them digging too much into your answers, right? So therefore, keep your answers sweet, concise, and clear to the questions that is being asked. And do not become too friendly with the interviewer. Like I said in the beginning, you should smile, of course, and you should be friendly with the interviewer. You should smile, shake their hands, and have a very friendly banter, but do not become too friendly with them. They're not your friends. They're not you're not in kindergarten. You're not gonna be playing in the grass afterwards. Nope. You are in a professional setting. Do not start telling them about your dog and how it likes to run with the ball. It's that's not something that they're interested in, because you should keep a very professional tone. And of course, yes, you should talk to them to be able to break the ice, but don't become too friendly too quickly with the interviewer. And do not check your phone during the interview. Put it in silent and switch off the vibrating thing on the phone. And do not, and even if you do get a text, do not take it out to check it. Better yet, put it in your jacket or put it in your bag so that you're not, you're not disturbed by it. It comes across as very rude that you're being asked a question, and then all of a sudden you take out your phone and you're answering a text. Never do that. Finally, do not lie about your resume or your personality. Never ever lie about a resume, and never ever lie about your personality either, because if you don't like running, don't say you like running. If you don't know how to play the guitar, don't tell them that you play a guitar. The problem is that if you lie about these things and then they find out afterwards that you lied about it, it's embarrassing. Secondly, you come across as untrustworthy. And then you are planting this idea that if you were willing to lie about this part, what else were you lying about? So therefore, avoid it at all costs. And finally, do not be afraid to admit that you are wrong. If you give an answer, if they're asking you a question about something that you have never worked with before, say that, oh, I don't know. I have not worked with this before, but I will be willing to learn it. Secondly, like I said earlier as well, if they ask you a hypothetical question and you came up with a situation and then you feel that, no, I did not handle that correctly, tell them that, well, we did not handle it correctly the last time. When in hindsight, I think in the future, I would like to handle it slightly more differently. So that these are the 10 things that you should not do during your interview. And now coming down to the major question for the interview is that how do you bring up your salary? The thing is that you have to wait till the end of the interview. And it's actually more of a strategic question, because during your interview, you must be able to convince the person that you are very skillful, you are the right person for the job, and they will not find a better candidate than you. If you are able to convince them on these 3 points, then towards the end, then you should bring up your salary, because then you have planted the seed in their head that you are the right person and you are worth every single penny that they will be giving you, right? Therefore, if you wait till the very end, then you will have a much higher chance of better salary negotiations. The second thing is you have to be realistic. I would love to get paid $1 million for as my salary per month, but that's not realistic. Even though how much I feel that I deserve it, but that's not realistic, right? You cannot be getting paid more than the CEO. You can't be getting paid more than your manager. So therefore, what you should do is that you should research the salary brackets for the job that you are applying for. And nowadays, you can easily find it on the internet. Google it, check for the company, ask around, and then take a very general outlook. For example, let's say that you are working in US, and then you find out that as a process engineer, you can be getting paid between, I don't know, $1,000 per month, for example, right? So make like an estimate. Say that, okay, I should be asking between $800 to $1,200, for example. And then you should be able to present that idea in the interview as well. You should let them know that you are aware of the pay bracket. That is also very important. When you're in there, when they ask you about your salary, say that, well, I did a check on the internet. I asked around and I found out that the process engineers, they get paid around between $800 to $1,200 per month. And therefore, I would, of course, expect that I should be getting paid in that bracket. But do not give away that information until they have told you the salary that they have been approved to give you. Because let's say they have been approved to give you $1,600, and now you just told them that you think that you get paid between 800 and 1,200, then obviously they're going to pay you between 800 and 1,200. You are saving them $400, right? So try to get them to tell you what are the pay bracket for the job that you're applying for, and secondly, how much they been approved for that job role. If they tell you that, then you should base your answer on that. Secondly, you should be confident and you should know your worth. You should know that if you have been working in the industry for the past 5 years, you have worked on multiple projects, you have done this, you have done that, how much are you actually worth to the company? Just because it says on Google that a process engineer should only be making $800 per month does not mean that you should be making $800 per month, right? Because if you have published 5 papers on membrane technology, you have been working in the company for the past 5 years, you have worked on many high-level projects for the past 2 years, you have been doing more work than your manager, you have been doing more work than many of the other employees, then you deserve more than $800. And you should bring that up during the interview as well. You should let them know that, well, I have been doing this, I have been doing that, I have been working with this, I have experience in this area, I can offer so much to the company, and I feel that because of my skill sets, because of my experience, I deserve to get paid around not 800, which is the baseline, but I should get paid around at least $1,000. And that's how you negotiate your salary, in a way that you have to almost convince them to pay you the correct amount of money, right? But at the same time, again, you have to be realistic, because if you would like a higher salary, then you might have to go to a higher role. You can't get paid more than your manager. You obviously can't get paid more than your CEO. So therefore, keep that in mind and be realistic, but do not compromise on the salary part. You have to be flexible, but you don't have to compromise on the salary. And there's a very slight difference between the two. For example, you have to be flexible in a way that instead of getting 1,200, you get paid 1,100, but then you get some benefits on the side. You get healthcare, you get dental care, or you get permission to work from home, or you get permission to get a half day every Friday. So you are a bit flexible on that area, but you should never ever compromise on the salary. For example, you should not allow the employer to pay you one level below to what you are deserving of. To give you an example, let's say that you graduate with a chemical engineering degree, you get called in for an operator job. You are a chemical engineer, and then they tell you that you will be doing the same job as a chemical engineer and as an operator, but you will be getting paid as an operator, but you will be getting paid a lot more in experience. That is a compromise, right? That you shouldn't do. Why? Because that you're not really getting paid as much as you're actually worth. You're not being flexible. You will be giving the company more for a lot less money, right? So therefore, be flexible, but do not compromise. And that is essentially how you should, bring up your salary during the interview. Bring it up till the end. At the end of the interview, be realistic, be confident, and know your worth. You should know that you are deserving of $1,000, and that you won't accept a single penny below. But still, if they're offering a very good position, if they're offering a very good opportunity, then you can be a bit flexible. But being flexible does not mean that you should compromise on the job or the job salary. Yep, so that was all that you should be doing during your interview. But then once you have shaken hands, answered all the questions, said goodbyes, then what you should do after the interview? Do not forget to follow up. Once you get home, you should type a very good email right after, thanking them for the day, telling them that you were very happy to be there, you were very comfortable throughout the interview, and that you will be looking forward to their reply. It doesn't have to be a very long email, just like maybe 3 sentences, just telling them that thank you so very much. I'm very much looking forward to hearing back from you. And I had a very great time during the interview today, and I learned a great deal about you and about the company. That's it. Do that on the same day. Don't wait 4 days to send them a thank you email. Do that on the same day. Go home in the evening, or type up an email and send that to them. It is always and even if you don't get the job, it's also a good idea to show your appreciation and to show that you're grateful to them for the interview. Secondly, if they have asked for any information, like it could be a referral to your previous manager, it could be your degree, for example, it could be your certificates, it could be your other information, send that in on the same day. Of course, maybe if you are looking for a referral, then you may have to speak to your previous manager first, but latest by next day. It's always a good idea to have things ready beforehand, before the interview, especially who should you be using as a referral. Your degree, your certificates, your resume, everything should be ready. And then if they ask you for it, you should send that right away. Again, it shows that you are prepared and you're a professional, and that you are very planned, that you have planned the entire interview in a very good manner. So, try to send that up on the same day if possible. Thirdly, give them a ring. If you do not hear back from them within a week, then it's a good idea to give them a ring and say, oh, hey, so I was in the interview a week ago, but I have not heard back from you guys. So I wanted to just call in and check, where are you with the interview process? Or when can I expect an answer about the interview? Again, it shows that you are genuinely interested about the job, and you have to keep pushing them. Also, what happens many times is that they may have forgotten about you as well. So when you give them a call and you talk to them for 2 minutes, you kind of refresh their memory about you as well. So you're like, oh yeah, this guy, the guy that gave those answers a week ago. So that is also a very good strategy, to always give them a ring. And in the worst case scenario, if you don't get the job, don't be disheartened. It's part of the process. Still, give them a ring and say that, thank you so very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate that you called me for the interview, but could you kindly give me a little bit of feedback on why I did not get the job, or what I can do to improve myself for my next interview? The thing you have to remember is that job search is a trial and error process. No one knows. There is no fixed answer how to pass an interview. There is no fixed answer to get a job. unless of course your father owns the company. But other than that, there is no fixed science on how to land the how to pass these job search criteria, right? The entire process is based on feedback. uh, you go for one interview, you get feedback, you improve your posture, you improve your answers, you improve your interview skills. You go for a second interview, you again ask for feedback. They tell you that, we didn't like the way that you spoke about your previous employer. uh, we didn't like the way that your body language was very weak during the interview. That's how you realize that, okay, so my body language is not very good during interviews. That is something that I should improve. Okay, maybe my answers were too long. Maybe that's where I should improve. Because I think that my answers are perfect. To be very honest, I feel like if I am an interview, that I gave perfect answers. That I followed the STAR method. My body language was very good, because consciously we believe that what we are answering is the right answer, right? But unless you get the feedback from the second person, that's when you start to realize that, okay, so there is need for improvement. Okay, so my body language was the problem. Okay, yeah, I was speaking too fast during the interview. So always ask for feedback, because the only people that can help you improve your resume, improve your interview skills, improve your everything, these are the people that you're speaking when you're giving the interview. And what happens is that, at the same time, you have to remember that not every company, again, job search is a very subjective process. Something that may work for one company may not work for the other company. So you still have to keep that in mind, that just because one manager of one company told you that he didn't like that you added volunteer experience in your resume, that you should completely remove it. It doesn't mean that you should remove it at all. It means that that guy didn't like it. It is very possible, it is very plausible that some other guy in a different company may actually prefer having that on your CV. So therefore, always it gets slightly difficult, like, okay, should I follow his advice, or should I use the other template? But again, like I said, you have to go with what's normal, and what is acceptable in all platforms by all companies. But again, always ask for feedback, and that is like something that I tell everyone, that you should remember, that you should always ask for feedback, because that is your main opportunity to learn more about yourself and to improve yourself. Yep. So that is all that what you should do before an interview, during an interview, and after an interview. And so now, if you have any questions about the questions of the interviews, then we can take them now. And if you have any other question that might come to your mind, then yeah, you can feel free to reach out to us at Chemical Engineering Life, or you can reach out to me directly if you may have any questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, sir, for this session. It was amazing.
Oh, thank you so very much, and thank you so very much for attending. And if
Thank
you
you.
Thank you. And if you would like to learn more about job search and CV and resumes, then I suggest that you check out the our partner, JobMink, and you can book them up for one-on-one consultations, where they can specifically talk to you about your own resume, and they also have mock interviews which you can partake, and they can give you feedback on different things. And also they have different group courses on specifically on the interviews and on different CV and resume writing. So do remember to check out the people at JobMink. And we once again are truly grateful to the people at JobMink for providing us with all the insights for which we could hold the webinar today. And also, do not forget to check out the initiatives of Chemical Engineering Life as well, where you can go in and check out and partake in our courses, webinars, and our mentorship program. Great. And then once again, thank you so very much for attending on a Saturday morning. And I really hope that you got something out of the webinar, and that you can hopefully use it in the future. And hopefully the tips can help you land your next job. Thank you very much. Then I hope you all have a lovely weekend. And
Thank you so much, sir.
thank you. Bye bye.